Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Bonds and Stories, we retell those moments honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. I was wiping dust from the cedar mantle when the wind came up the mesa and rattled the porch chimes. Hartstead the house. Calvin and I raised out of adobe and sweat holds sound the way old guitars do. That evening it went into the kitchen where a lemon pie cooled and a kettle ticked toward boil. 70 candles waited in a drawer I almost couldn't open. I set out chipped plates I refused to replace and ran a palm along the table Calvin built from salvage beams. He used to say a house lives longer when it keeps its scars. Daniel texted they'd be a few minutes late. Brianna likes to arrive when the room is ready. I smoothed my blouse and touched the emerald locket Calvin gave me. It was warm from my skin, a small bright weight that steadied me when the kettle whistled. Tires crunched the gravel. They came in on a breeze of perfume and air conditioning. Brianna's heels ticked across the tiles. Daniel's smile flared quick. He kissed my cheek, sniffed the pie. Brianna circled the room with her arms folded like she was measuring it for a new owner. "It's cozy," she said. "We could open this up, take down the half wall, bring in light. Bone white on these walls would be gorgeous." "These walls were mixed by hand," I said. "They remember where the straw is." She smiled like I'd told a story. Daniel rubbed his hands. "Let's just eat before the pie gets cold, okay?" I set out the roast and the salad with the little red onions he hates and eats anyway. We bowed heads. I thanked the Lord for another year and for the people at my table. When we lifted our eyes, Brianna had a catalog open, glossy pages catching the sun. "Just ideas," she said, "for after the party." Daniel told a story about work that didn't hide the part he left out. Brianna pointed at lamps on paper that looked nothing like light. When the pie was cut, Mrs. Green raised a toast to Hartstead. She called it the bone of the town. Brianna laughed soft and neat. "Well, it's a lovely starter home. It just needs a vision." The room leaned. Daniel set his fork down too fast and it clinked. "Bree," he said, "don't. I'm not starting anything." She turned toward me. "You've kept everything exactly as it was in 1986. That's sweet, but homes should evolve. We can help." And Mrs. Green looked at Daniel like he still had time to pick a different sentence. He didn't. He cleared his throat, straightened his shoulders, and chose the wrong door. "Mom," he said, trying for gentle and landing on firm. "Don't make this harder on Brianna. She's the one making this place livable. This is Brianna's house." The words didn't shout. They landed. A dull thud under the ribs. Somebody's glass touched wood. The chime sounded though no wind moved. Brianna's mouth held the hint of a smile, the kind of person can't hide when a line finally bends. I didn't answer him. Not right away. I poured coffee, sugar then cream. The spoon traced slow circles until the clatter died. "Daniel," I said, "help me clear." He nodded and stacked plates he couldn't meet his eyes over. Brianna leaned back, measuring the ceiling with her stare. The neighbors offered good nights. When the door shut behind them, the house exhaled, but the air had a new shape. I ran water until it turned hot. Daniel stood with a dish towel trying to be useful. "She doesn't mean it like that," he said. She wants things bright. You know how she is." "I know how walls are," I said. "They hold the roof up even when no one talks about them." He swallowed and nodded. He kissed my temple and mumbled that they had to go. Meetings, a brunch, words that mean leaving. I walked them to the door. Brianna hugged me without touching much. "Happy birthday, Evelyn," she said. "We'll circle back on the plan once you've had time to think." When the porch light caught the dust in their taillights, I went back in and turned off what didn't need to burn. I listened to the house, the tick of the stove as it cooled the loose board in the hall, the breath of the old cooler. I dried my hands on the apron Calvin loved. In the hallway, I flipped the switch and washed the plaster with light. The wall to the left holds the year's first days of school Calvin, in a straw hat with a shovel Daniel, with a black eye and a blue ribbon the same day. I had polished those frames that afternoon, small circles with a soft cloth. 3 rectangles were pale against the adobe. In their place, a single mirror hung gold frame wide enough to slice the wall in two. I stepped closer and found my face floating over the spot where Calvin's hat used to be. The mirror showed the hallway longer and emptier than it was. I didn't call anyone. I didn't say a thing. I lifted the mirror an inch to feel its weight and felt the hole behind it where a nail had been pulled and replaced. In the glass, my hand looked steady. The emerald at my throat caught a shard of light and held it. By morning, the mirror had learned the hallway's light. It threw a long, bright blade across the floorboards and made the passage look bigger than it was. I stood there with my coffee until the steam thinned and the glass fogged in an oval where my breath touched it. Behind the frame, the faint ghosts of my missing pictures stayed pale against the adobe, as if the wall remembered better than any of us. Down in the kitchen, a draft moved the curtains. I hadn't chosen those curtains. Sometime between pie and good nights, the lace I stitched years ago had slipped off the rod, and a pair of linen panels the color of unbaked bread had taken their place, hung with rings that clicked when the wind spoke. On the table lay a glossy catalog with a triangle folded into the page for chandeliers that didn't know dust. I shut it and felt the paper settle like a lid. The first buzz came from my phone, an alert from the bank, a charge posted at Misa and Bone Interiors, $600, then a second Santa Fe fixtures, $340. I scrolled farther back than I wanted to. The week before had a pair of amounts under Brianna Hale Design LLC, a name my card had never met. The roast pan waited, the sink waited, the house waited. I set the phone face down on the counter and listened to the cooler breathe. A truck engine rolled up the road, heavy but careful, the sound you hear when a neighbor gets a delivery of feed. It stopped at my gate. Voices followed men's voices in morning key, half jokes, half work. I stepped onto the porch. Sun broke clean over the mesa and lit the Hartstead sign I'd rubbed with oil last spring. A white pickup with Matador landscape on the door eased in, then another. Orange flags bobbed from short sticks in a bundle. The foreman, a man with a sun line where his cap lived, lifted 2 fingers in a greeting. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "We'll be quick." For what I asked, he checked a clipboard. Drip lines. Removing the flagstone cutting in a trench 2 feet off the porch for a drought bed. Notes say, he looked down again. Open sightline to the arroyo. Notes? From who? He tapped the page with a blunt nail. Mrs. Hart. "I'm Mrs. Hart." The younger one, he said, not unkind. "Brianna." He said her name like he knew it now. The men began unrolling tape measures. One took a can of blue paint and flicked his wrist. A low line winked into the gravel like a vein. I walked down the steps and watched a hand reach for my sage. Calvin and I planted that sage on a morning like this, when the wind had mercy and bees still felt like company. "Hold," I said. The man did. He looked at the foreman. The foreman looked at the clipboard. I looked at the earth. "You're on private property," I said. "You'll wait." He shifted, kicked a small rock back into the bed. "We've got an 11 o'clock into Suke." "You'll still have it," I said. The foreman scratched his cheek. "Look, ma'am, we're not arguing. We just do what's on the order. We already staged the trenchers. If you change your mind, there's a reschedule fee." "Write your fee on the back of your card," I said, "and set your machines by the fence for now." He studied my face the way men do when they weigh how stubborn is going to cost them an hour. He told the crew to take 5 and leaned a pick against the truck. The yard settled back into its sounds, the cicada that had found the tamarisk, the chug from a far tractor, the soft spit of the cooler inside. On the porch, I dialed Daniel. It rang through to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I called again. He answered on the 4th try with a voice that pretended to be wide awake. "Hey, Mom, there are men here with paint and trenchers." "Oh," he said. "Write the irrigation. Bray had it set for today. It's just better for the plants. Drip is more efficient. Everybody says so." "Everybody who?" "Pinterest," he said, then felt the weight of that and tried to correct. "I mean, the designer. You put charges on my card." "It's the household card, Mom. It's my card." He sighed, the kind of sigh you hear when a person is already late for something. "We'll cover it." "Okay, we'll reconcile it later. Can you just let them do the front? It's not a big deal." "The front is the face. A place shows the road," I said. "We'll not move its mouth without asking." "Mom." "Bring Brianna out," I said. She's getting ready." "For what?" "Meetings," he said. "Bring her anyway." He said he'd call me back. He didn't. The foreman lifted his chin at me like, well, I lifted mine back. He told the men to start on a measurement for the side yard instead. They placed flags along the path Calvin and I had made from broken tiles, scraps he'd saved from a job in town when a hotel decided Spanish floors were out. I knelt and plucked the smallest flag from the dust. The wire bit my fingers, but I kept it. In the garage, the cedar chest had been dragged behind the bench, tilted on a corner like a man who never learned to stand. My name was chalked on the lid in a hand I didn't know. When I pushed it flat, the scent of old wood and hand cream rose like a memory you smell before you see. Inside the quilt, my mother gave me the picnic blanket we hadn't used since Calvin's last summer, a stack of envelopes tied in twine I recognized as my own. At the bottom sat a leather sketchbook. Calvin's. The elastic was cracked. I lifted it and dust bloomed in a soft cloud. I took the sketchbook to the workbench and opened where the ribbon kept his place. Plan after plan for Hartstead lived there, a porch addition that never got built. A trellis we decided we didn't need, irrigation lines drawn in pencil, then erased, then drawn again with neat numbers I could hear him mutter. In the back, tucked beneath the pocket, a folded sheet in a plastic sleeve, a letter with a notary stamp. Calvin's name, my name, the parcel number that had become a part of my brain. The words were simple, that Hartstead belonged to us, and would remain in my custody should one of us die. That any alterations to structure or landscape required the owner's consent in writing. The seal was 3 decades old and implacable. I pressed my thumb to the stamp until the circle warmed. Outside, the whine of a tape measure stuttered and clicked. I went to the kitchen and set the letter on the table beside the catalog. When I lifted my coffee, my fingers found the small empty place at my throat where the locket usually rested. I didn't panic. I walked the route I'd walked 1,000 nights, sink to hall to mirror to bedroom to hook where I leave my apron. No green flash in a corner, no thin chain asleep on wood. I checked the windowsill by the lemons. I checked the pocket of the cardigan I'd worn. The chain wasn't there. When I called Daniel again, Brianna answered. "Hey, Evelyn," she said, brisk from hairspray or a second coffee. "We were just about to head out. What's up?" "My locket's gone," I said. "It was on me last night." "Relax," she said. "I put it somewhere safe." "Where?" "In the safe," she said, and laughed at her own joke. "In the guest room. It didn't go with your blouse, and I didn't want it to snag." "You're welcome. Open the safe and tell me you're holding it." "We're not at the house," she said. "Daniel's got a thing. I've got two. We'll swing by later. The men are here to dig." "Perfect," she said. "They were supposed to be there at 9. I sent them notes. We'll FaceTime the final layout if you like." "I don't," I said. She hesitated just long enough to betray surprise. "Okay, well, I'll text the foreman." "Do that," I said, "and text me the code to the safe." "You don't have the code." "No." "Daniel said it," she said, and then the line crackled with her turning away from him to ask. Muffled talk, a drawer sliding. She came back with a brightness that felt pointed. "I'll DM it." "Text it," I said, and hung up. The code came through 10 minutes later with a smiley I ignored. I opened the guest room closet where a small matte black box now sat on the floor like a new pet and keyed the numbers. Inside lay a passport, the title to Daniel's truck, a velvet pouch that should have held my locket but held air. I turned the pouch inside out anyway. A single green thread clung to the seam and caught on my nail. Back on the porch, the foreman cupped a hand to his mouth. "Ma'am, we need your call." I looked down at the letter seal, then at the yard flags, chalk strings, and men in hats. The sun had shifted. By noon, it would push the heat flat to the stone. Across the lane, Mrs. Green collected her mail and gave me a little salute that said more than a word. From the truck bed, a man took up a chalk reel and snapped a line so blue it looked like sky laid on earth. It ran straight across the flagstone Calvin and I set 1 August, with our knees in the grit and a pitcher of water sweating by the steps. I stepped off the porch and knelt where the line crossed a crack we'd decided to keep. My hand fit the groove like it had been saving me a place. The men watched without hurry. The foreman lowered his clipboard. A crow cut the air in a black seam and vanished somewhere past the arroyo. I stood, dusted my palms, and stayed between the chalk and the stone until the sound of engines eased, and the only thing left moving was the curtain ring clicking against its rod in the kitchen window. By the time the last truck eased down the lane, the chalk line had already lost its edge to the sun. I went inside, pulled Calvin's letter from the plastic sleeve, and laid it flat on the kitchen table. The notary seal round as a coin kept catching the light and giving it back. I called Ava Cortez. She picked up on the second ring, with the dry, awake voice of someone who has spent her life in courthouses that smell like paper and air conditioning. "Evelyn, I've got men with trenchers and a letter with a seal," I said. "That the parcel affidavit Calvin filed?" "It is." "Put coffee on," she said. 10 minutes. When Ava arrived, the porch took her weight like it remembered her. We'd all eaten bean stew out there the winter the pipes burst, and Calvin fixed them with a blowtorch and a prayer. She stepped through my door and didn't look at the catalog on the table. She looked at the letter. She read every line twice, then ran a thumbnail around the seal. "Still good," she said. "Better than good." "What about the charges on my card?" "We'll get there. First, we draw the line." Ava took a legal pad from her bag and wrote in a slanted, tidy hand, "Affidavit of ownership on premises. Notice of non-consent to alterations." She drafted both as if she'd already written them in her sleep. When she finished, she slid the papers over for my signature. "You sign. I'll scan and send copies to anyone who tries to forget their manners." The printer in her car hummed the way locusts do when noon gets close. She brought back a neat stack clipped, stamped with her firm's name. "We'll also log a courtesy call to the sheriff's office," she said. "No drama, just documentation." The house felt taller when she left. I set the signed notice in a place you couldn't miss, a blue bowl Calvin had carved a notch into to fit his thumb. Then I called Jay Morales, who can smell a crooked hinge from across the street. "Got a deadbolt that sticks," I said, "and a latch that lets in people it shouldn't." Jay laughed, once friendly and brief. "I'll bring the set I like," he said. "Looks old, works new." He came with a toolbox that had seen more porches than most dogs. In the kitchen, he nodded at the table, the letter, the catalog. He didn't touch any of it. On the front door, he measured twice and breathed little clouds of sawdust as he mortised clean pockets for the plates. The new locks were brass-faced and quiet. They kept the good heft of old hardware, but answered to codes and cards you could change by afternoon. He oiled the hinges, tightened the strike, and set the privacy latch that bites like a small certain animal. You'll want to keep spares, he asked. No, I said, and let that be enough. When Jay was done, he stood on the porch and read the blue bowl notice like a man reading a road sign before a turn. Good writing, he said. Clear. I had help. Best kind. He stepped down and patted the post as if the house had shoulders you could brace. Call if anything sings wrong. After he left, I made a group text. I didn't decorate. No changes to house or grounds are permitted without written consent of the owner. Work orders are canceled. Keys are invalid as of noon. E. I watched the dots pulse and vanish, and then come back again until the screen told me the message had been seen. I was pouring a second cup when a white county Tahoe rolled slow into the shade. Deputy Leon Price climbed out all hat and courtesy. He moved like men do who've spent their lives not rushing unless someone's bleeding. Ms. Hart, he said, touching the brim. Deputy, I said. Got a call from Ms. Cortez. Just a courtesy check. You need anything? I need quiet, I said, and folks to respect a door. He looked at the new brass and nodded. Pretty way to say it. He took my statement in a small notebook that could fit in his palm. He glanced at the notice in the bowl and read enough to know what it was. If a dispute gets loud, he said, I can stand on your steps and ask people to be better. I can also file a civil trespass warning if we get there. Won't start at 11. Good, I said. I'd like to start at 0. We stood a moment listening to the yard hold its breath. The curtain ring ticked the rod. A blue jay cursed at something I couldn't see. From the road, a dust ribbon lifted and settled. They came just after 2, the caravan you can hear before you see laughter rising ahead of it like the rattle of seed in a tin. Brianna stepped out in a crisp blouse and sunglasses that flashed the yard back at itself. 2 of her friends unfurled measuring tapes and buzzed their phones. Behind them, a florist's van lingered its back doors, lashed with twine. Afternoon, Brianna said, bright and East Coast. We're here for the walkthrough. The what, I asked. The walkthrough for Saturday, she said, as if naming something made it belong to her. Table layout, traffic flow, the new drip lines. Honestly, the sooner we cut the trench, the better. The mats arrive tomorrow. Not here, I said. She smiled like a teacher coaxing a child. Evelyn, let's not make this formal. This is formal, I said, and lifted the blue bowl notice with 2 fingers. Read. She didn't take it. She watched my mouth instead. Daniel, she called over her shoulder, can you? He came halfway up the path with his hands out empty. He had that look a man gets when he's balancing 2 quiets and both are slipping. Mom, he said, we're just staging. No one's bulldozing anything. I'm not your mom right now, I said. I'm the owner, and the owner says no. Behind them, a friend lifted a tripod and tried the door. The new lock gave a small patient beep that I liked more than I expected. Key, the friend asked. Try the side, Brianna said. Side won't help, a voice said from the steps. Deputy Price had moved to the porch rail with the kind of ease that doesn't announce itself. He tipped his hat toward Brianna. Ma'am? She adjusted her sunglasses. Is there a problem, officer? No problem, he said. Just a courtesy presence on a civil matter. This is a family matter, she said. Sure is, he said, and it's also a house with an owner who's posted notice. Brianna laughed. Ooh, mama? Small and precise. Are we pretending that little letter means something? Deputy Price looked at me. I nodded once. He took the notice, read the header, and handed it back, not pretending, he said, recognizing. The landscape foreman who had hung back in his truck took that as his cue to come forward with his clipboard like a shield. We've got orders, he told the deputy. Paid deposit. We're just here to dig. You'll want to reschedule, the deputy said, and his voice stayed lazy as shade. Today, there's no consent from the owner. You dig, we write it up. The florist poked her head out the van window. We're not unloading if there's a ticket, she said, and turned the key with a moral clarity people who work with flowers often have. But Brianna's mouth tightened. This is getting absurd, she said, and climbed 2 steps to face me, without the deputy's shoulder between us. Up close, I could see the effort it had cost her to keep everything in line, the tight jaw, the perfect, effortful calm. Evelyn, she said softly, you are making us look foolish. No, I said, I'm making us look accurate. Daniel, she said, still looking at me, say something. He looked at the door he couldn't open and then at the neighbors who had begun to gather with the gentle neighborly curiosity small towns maintain the mail still in Mrs. Green's hand, a boy on a bike with 1 foot on the curb, Mr. Alvarez's dog sitting like a witness. Bree, he said we should go. We should not, she said. We should finish what we started. What you started, I said. Deputy Price cleared his throat. Folks, he said, and didn't raise his voice. This porch is not a courtroom. It's a porch. You've been asked to leave by the owner. Let's let the day cool off some. For a second, everything stilled, the yard, the road, the edges of it all. Brianna's friends looked at their phones like a verdict might arrive by screen. The foreman chewed his lip and did the math of hours versus hassle. Daniel rubbed his knuckles the way he did when he was 10 and had lied about a C. Brianna turned her head just enough to see the faces by the fence. Mrs. Green didn't smile or frown. She simply met Brianna's eyes and held them with an older woman's patience. Whatever passed there passed without words. Brianna's shoulders let down a fraction. "Fine," she said. "We'll regroup." She took one step back, then another. To the foreman, "Hold the date. I'll confirm." To Daniel, under her breath, "You'll fix this." To me, nothing. They went the way cars and people do, when a plan finds a wall edges first, then middle, then tail. Engines turned, gravel crackled, the blue chalk line on the stone looked suddenly lonely and out of place. Deputy Price stayed until the road sat quiet again. He tipped his hat, wrote a brief note in his book, and gave me a card with his number already circled. "Call if the day reheats," he said. When the porch was mine again, I took the sketchbook back out. I flipped to the page where Calvin had drawn the front gate. We never finished 2 cedar posts and a crossbeam he'd labeled in block letters, "Hartstead, Calvin, and Evelyn Est." United 1986. He'd sketched the way the sun would fall across the letters at 9 in the morning, the drop shadows neat as bricks. A graphite smudge at the corner showed where he'd rested the side of his hand. If I pressed my thumb there, I could almost feel the heat of his work. I set the book on the table near the notice and the bowl and the keys I didn't intend to copy. In the yard, the curtain ring clicked once, twice, like a small clock deciding to keep time. A jay lifted from the tamarisk and shouldered the afternoon further down the lane. The house did what houses do when the door is shut and the light is honest. It held still and kept standing. Night put a lilac rim on the mesas. I drove into town with the windows cracked and the radio low past the feed store and the shuttered movie house until the blue Cactus Diner threw its neon on the asphalt like a shallow lake. Inside, the air smelled of hot griddle and old coffee. Booths were half full of men in caps and a couple in Sunday clothes on a Thursday. Daniel sat with his back to the wall, hands around a cup he hadn't touched. He looked up when the bell over the door rang. The face was my boy's, and not the way a face changes when it has been trying too long to hold two truths. "Mom," he said, standing halfway, "thanks for coming." "I didn't come for this pie," I said, and slid into the booth. He tried for a smile and failed. The waitress set down water and called me Miss Evelyn like I was 25. Daniel waited until she drifted away, then reached into his jacket and put a velvet pouch on the formica between us. The pouch was the green of old billiard tables. A string had frayed to a single hair. "I got it back," he said. "I'm sorry it had to be gotten." I opened the pouch with fingers that wouldn't hurry. The emerald locket came out cold, then warmed in my palm the way a coin remembers a pocket. The hinge stuck for a second and let go. Inside, Calvin's tiny sketch of a leaf was still there under the glass. One vein, one curve, one signature I knew by heart. A pawn ticket lay under the pouch, creased and stamped and ugly in the way some truths are. How much, I asked. He told me. He had paid the fee and the interest and a little extra because the owner had seen him come in twice before turning back to the door. "She said it didn't match," he said. "She said she was keeping it safe. I didn't know she'd taken it. I didn't know until I did." "Where are you sleeping?" I asked. He lifted one shoulder. "The Motor Lodge on 84, they put cinnamon in the coffee." "It doesn't help." We both looked at the locket until its green stopped feeling like accusation. "There's something else," he said. "I lost the Barker contract. Word gets around. People saw the deputy at the house and think I can't keep a crew on schedule. I keep thinking if I'd said one decent sentence on that porch, we'd be fine. I did not say it." The jukebox hiccuped into an old song it liked a steel guitar trying to remember a river. Daniel rubbed his knuckles the same motion he used to make when he was 10 and had scraped his bike on the Arroyo wall and insisted the wall had jumped. "I can't fix this with the credit card," he said. "I thought I was protecting my wife by letting her speak for us. I was hiding." I set the locket on the table and let its chain puddle into a thin figure 8. "You want me to tell you it's all right, and we both know it isn't," I said. "I don't have consolation tonight. I have terms." He sat up straighter. His eyes were his father's in that second tired open. "You want back through my door," I said. "You don't move a nail without my written say. Not a curtain ring, not a stone. You pay back every charge you or she put on my card that I didn't sign for slow if it has to be, but straight. And you come to that porch when I ask, and you sit, and we put what we are saying into words you can't misremember. That's the price of a key." He nodded once, the kind of nod a man makes when he understands weight. "Yes, ma'am." We let silence be quiet for a while. The waitress brought pie anyway and set down 2 forks as if faith could be silver. I didn't touch mine. Daniel didn't either. He took a breath that sounded like the first one after a dive. "She's not the only one to blame," he said. "I'm not assigning blame," I said. "I'm setting fences. Blame blows over. Fences stay when the wind changes." His phone lit his jacket with a small square. He flipped it and stared at the screen and then at me. "It's Brianna," he said. He waited for my face to tell him whether to answer. I nodded. He put the call on speaker and set the phone on a napkin like it might leave a ring. "Where are you?" Brianna said. She had the voice people keep for the hallway outside a conference room, low, urgent, dressed in certainty. With Mom, he said. She took my calls, Brianna said, and then before I could answer. Don't hang up. I need to say this without you fixing it while I talk, Daniel. Static, then the little edge of breath people make when they have finally decided not to spin. I did those charges, she said. All of them. I told myself I was improving things, but I was rewriting things that weren't mine to write. I took the frames down. I ordered the crews. I put my name on deliveries addressed to Hartstead like the letters would move if I held them long enough. And the locket? The voice thinned and then steadied. I pawned it. I did. I wanted a new fixture before the brunch, and the store wouldn't hold it until payday. I told myself I'd buy it back before Evelyn noticed. I didn't. Daniel did. I'm sorry. The jukebox clicked to a different key. In the kitchen, a cook laughed once at something only the cook heard. Daniel's hand flattened on the table. Are you asking for forgiveness? I asked and kept my voice even. I'm not ready to ask for anything big, she said. I am ready to admit. I moved through someone else's house like a person who never had one. I spoke over you because being loud is easier than being honest. I see that now. The sentence didn't fix anything. It didn't try. It sat where it was and let itself be looked at. You want to step on my porch again, I said. You agree to what Daniel just agreed to, written permission before any change or repayment of what wasn't yours to spend, and a spoken record on that porch of what you are committing to. Not pretty words, precise ones. Yes, she said too fast, then slower. Yes. You need to understand there's no crown waiting behind the door, I said. I don't want a crown, she said. I want place. The way you say a person belongs without taking anything back. Daniel's eyes shone in a way he would hate me to name. He turned the pawn ticket over and back like it could turn into a map. I don't have much else to say, Brianna said. I can bring the receipts. I can put money back piece by piece. I can call the crews off myself. I can put the pictures up with my own hands if you tell me where they go, and if you don't want my hands, I will stand where you say and watch and learn. That is what I can do tonight. Good, I said. Static again and the sound of a car door shutting somewhere dark. Thank you for answering, she said, and the line went quiet. Daniel and I sat without the phone between us. He pushed the pawn ticket toward me. I'll frame it, he said, almost smiling. Not the ticket, the story. I slipped the locket into the blue bowl of my purse and left the velvet pouch on the table for a breath, then took that too. Outside, the neon buzzed and went brighter for a second like it was remembering how. We walked into the cool air and stood by my truck. Traffic on 14 hummed like a low song. I'll meet your terms, he said. They're not mine, I said. They're the house's. I just hear it better than most. He nodded and put his hand on the cab as if he were steadying the truck or himself. I touched the locket through the leather and felt its small, stubborn weight agree. The sky to the west had gone the color of cooled iron. Somewhere past the grain elevator, a dog barked twice. We didn't promise anything grand. We said goodnight the way people do who have decided to stop pretending the ground is level when it isn't. I drove back up the lane with the window down and let the mesa wind carry the smell of creosote and night into the cab, the chain faint against the leather like a second pulse. Morning came in clean over the flats, the kind of light that makes the stucco look like bread just out of the oven. I brewed coffee and opened the porch, propping the screen with Calvin's hammer. The blue bowl sat on the table with Ava's clipped papers inside. The new brass at the door took the sun and gave it back. Ava Cortez pulled up first in her dusty sedan files under one arm, a bakery bag under the other. For strength, she said, passing me a cinnamon roll big as a plate. She laid a single sheet on the table, neat as a deed. Read this out loud, or don't, she said. It works either way. The title said, Porch Covenant Hartstead. 6 lines, no more, written in the kind of English that sits where you put it. I didn't read them then. I left the page where the light kissed the ink. Jay Morales came next, bed of his truck stacked with cedar. He whistled once at the porch and once at the sky, both in tune. The crossbeam lay on blanket's letters chiseled deep, Calvin and Evelyn. Hart Este, 1986. He ran a thumb through one groove and nodded. Came out true, he said. He set his levels on the rail and shouldered a post. A White County Tahoe rolled slow and stopped under the mesquite. Deputy Leon Price climbed out, hat low, smile, quiet. Don't need me, he said, but I like a good morning. He leaned on the fence with Mrs. Green, who had arrived with a Tupperware of orange slices and a look that could hush a thunderhead. Daniel and Brianna walked up the drive without talking, without stage. He carried a manila envelope. She carried nothing but her 2 hands. Up close I saw what the night had done, his face less set. Hers undone in a way that didn't ask for pity. They stopped at the first step and waited like people do at a threshold that matters. Morning, I said. Morning, they both said, and I didn't make them say anything else. We gathered at the table. I slid the pouch and pawn ticket into the bowl beside Ava's page. Brianna noticed jaw tight, then eased when she saw I wasn't holding them like a gavel. Daniel laid his envelope down and kept his palm on it, a small anchor. I touched the top of the porch covenant with one finger. "We'll keep this short," I said in red. The words didn't preach. They arranged themselves: respect first, permission before changes, speak early, no triangles, pay what you move, honor the name, and then they were done. No speeches followed. I handed the pen to Daniel. "I agree," he said to me, not to the page, and signed. His name looked like his father's in the slope, not in the flourish. Brianna took the pen and didn't sign immediately. She looked up at the crossbeam on the blankets, the carved letters, the date. "I agree," she said, and signed where her hand would remember. Ava added her name as witness, then Mrs. Green, who said, "So no one forgets who heard it." "Keys," I said. Daniel lifted both hands, empty. "I don't have any," he said. "Good," I said, and set the old brass key, the one that had lived here before codes, on top of the covenant. It lay there like a paperweight that knows more than paper. We moved to the hallway. The mirror came down, Brianna taking one side, Daniel the other, careful, not dramatic. They leaned it in the garage against a wall that could hold it without asking for anything. Where Daniel said tapping the measuring tape to the adobe, I showed him the pale rectangles. We worked by inches. The nail went back where it had been. The frame with Calvin's hat found its square. Brianna wiped the glass with the corner of her sleeve. We didn't say much, just calls of level and a hair higher and the soft tink of a hanger touching home. In the kitchen, the catalog lay closed. Brianna picked it up, looked at the cover a long beat, then folded it once and slid it into her bag. "Receipts," she said, and opened Daniel's envelope. She laid papers and a check on the table without notes attached to them. Ava counted nothing. No one asked for a total. Numbers understand what they are without being introduced. On the porch, Jay and Daniel set posts and checked plumb. Brianna climbed the ladder and held the crossbeam while Jay marked centers. Cedar shavings made little curls by her shoes. "Last screw," Jay said, and offered the driver. She took it and drove the final fastener slow and straight, the bit, biting clean, the tool whining once, then quiet. When she climbed down, she wiped her hands on her blouse and didn't care about the print. We stepped back. The beam threw a small shade across the lane. The letters caught it and cast it right back. Calvin and Evelyn, Hartstead, 1986, read like something that had waited its whole life to be said out loud on wood. Mrs. Green clapped once because one clap was enough. Deputy Price tipped his hat to the air. Jay packed his tools like a man zipping a fine coat. "Holler if it sags," he said, knowing it wouldn't. I went inside and brought out a nail and a hammer. On the porch post just above my eye line, I set the nail with 2 taps and hung the emerald locket there. It caught the same light the brass had. It didn't look like a treasure on display. It looked like a marker, a small green yes. Brianna stood beside me and did not reach for it. "May I put the chairs back where they were?" she asked. "You may," I said, and she did. Scraping legs, soft setting angles you could sit in. Daniel carried a box in from the garage and set it by the door. Old doorknobs, the broken egg beater, Calvin's level. He held the level in both hands, bubble winking dead center, then put it on the rail and left it there like a visiting friend. The yard went about its work. Bees made the sage tremble. A curtain ring ticked once and then rested as if the house had remembered its own breath. Somewhere down 14, a truck downshifted. In town, the noon siren lifted and laid itself down again. We ate Mrs. Green's orange slices and Ava's roll in the porch shade. Brianna asked for a dish towel and wiped the cedar dust from the rail before she sat. Daniel poured water for everyone and did not spill. No one made toasts. When the plates were empty, I carried the porch covenant inside and slid it into a leather folder. On top of it, I placed the old brass key. The blue bowl kept its place on the table, now holding nothing that needed to be brandished. I put the kettle on and listened to it think about boiling. In the hall, the frames faced the door again. Calvin in his straw hat, my mother's quilt. Daniel with the blue ribbon and the black eye. The wall didn't look like a museum. It looked like a person who had sat down in their own chair. On the porch, the crossbeam loaned its shadow to the gate. The opening stayed what it had always been, wide enough for a person with sense to pass, narrow enough to notice when they did. We drank our coffee and water and let the air be kind. When it was time for them to go, we didn't say anything that tried to hold more than the moment. They walked back down the drive past the letters that had learned their place. After the cars left, the quiet was not empty. It was occupied by cedar, by paper, by names that fit. I took the locket from the nail and set it in the blue bowl until the light shifted. Then I stood at the gate and touched the carved ear with my thumb. The grain took it the way wood takes weather, without hurry, without fuss, just as part of what it's made to bear. The wind lifted once across the mesa and put the chimes to a soft, brief work. Then everything held. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.